Yeah.
About that.
It's showtime.
Welcome to the YATCast. This episode is about the separation of power and checks and balances. But first, I'd like to give many thanks to all my real life and social media friends who forced me to dig deeper, to get underneath the things that are going on, to find out what is happening, why things are the way they are. So, let's get started. Now, back in episode 1, I said that the founders were well read. By that I mean they were educated or voracious readers, in the case of people like Benjamin Franklin. Going back in time, the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence showed that our founding fathers seriously either disliked or distrusted unitary government. And by unitary government, I mean like a king or a small group of people that control everything but have little or no accountability. Now, they also knew of the pitfalls of democracy. And this was shown through the Articles of Confederation. For a group of disparate states, this was a failure. The Constitution was a compromise between democracy and a strong central government. Our federal government and most states separate rights. They also have separate powers. Most states follow the model of the Constitution. Most governmental groups within states also follow this model. Of a necessity and on purpose, they made the Constitution intricate but not complex because they wanted everyone to understand it. If you go back and listen to episode 1, you'll hear me say it's not rocket science. It isn't. You don't need a scholar to decipher it for you. They said what they meant, and they meant what they said. Now, the Constitution gave us 3 separate but equal branches at the federal level. Most states follow that same structure. There's the legislative that creates the laws, the administrative that enforces the laws, and the judicial, which tries the law breakers. This is what most people think of when we talk about separation of power. Now, why 3? Why 3 branches? It is the smallest number that can never be divided equally. If it came down to a truly constitutional crisis, between the 3, it will be resolved one way or another. There is also another separation of power granted through rights. It is that the people have the ultimate power. The states have the next most, and the federal the least. This is attested to by the preamble of the Constitution, quote, we the people, and the 9th Amendment. It is not the wealthy, it is not the church, it is not corporations, it's not business. It is people. It is you and me. Now, it's hard to separate the separation of powers from checks and balances and rights when it comes to the government. They are intertwined, especially when it comes to the people. Inherent within the separation of power is also the first level of checks and balances. That is why our founding fathers combined and intertwined them. So it is almost impossible to undo. Now, to understand, you must divorce yourself from the view that our government is the people in D.C. in order that you can get a better view of it. The U.S. is us. you and me. And we, you and me, are the U.S. We are the country. We are the government. Personally, I believe quite a few in government are there to self-deal. Just about all do to some degree. A few are there to actually do the people's business. This is where checks and balances comes in. Most often when someone talks about checks and balances, they're talking about the interaction between the president and Congress. Checks and balances are actually throughout the founding documents, but let's start with the president and Congress. Congress has the following rights, powers, and checks and balances. The power of the purse through the House, and the approval of cabinet members through the Senate. Most people know these. However, they also have been given the right and power of oversight and impeachment. It's just a few things, but it's actually quite powerful. The president or the administration has the power of veto, which Congress can override. There's also a little used, especially as of late, check that the administration has on Congress. The vice president is in charge of the Senate. There is also the majority leader is not. At most, the majority leader is President pro tem, or the temporary president of the Senate during the absence of the vice president. The president also has the ability through the Department of Justice to enforce laws upon members of Congress, although they should not do it as retribution. Okay. But how are there checks and balances being manifest between Congress and the Supreme Court? Well, Congress also has oversight of the Supreme Court. The Senate is required to confirm or not the justices. Congress also has the ability to put regulations on the Supreme Court, as long as it doesn't violate the Supreme Court's inherent powers and rights. One I would love to see is that the Supreme Court has to follow the rules for all other judges, such as recusal. The Supreme Court was set up to be the court of last appeal for regular law, although it is not explicit in the Constitution. However, they have taken it upon themselves to only do cases that involve the constitutionality of things. Laws, executive orders, yada yada. Now, within the confines of the Constitution, they were given the right to deal with things internal to their branch. But what about checks and balances? Their check is a two-edged sword that they can declare laws invalid. This also applies to things the president does, including essential orders. Now, how about the president and the Supreme Court? The president is required to nominate justices for vacancies and enforcement of laws upon the individual justices. That is within the federal government. But did you know there are checks and balances elsewhere as well? Bear in mind that we, all of us, you and me, are the country and the government. This is laid out in the Constitution. As I said, the ultimate power lies with we the people. Let's start there. The ultimate check on our government is the vote. There are many others that we call rights. Read the list in the Declaration of Independence. They're not just complaints. Every couple of years, the people decide get to vote to decide if there should be a shift in the direction our country is going by electing representatives. Every 4 years, the people vote for delegates to select our president. Wait, but what about the Senate? This will be covered in a later episode, but suffice it to say for now that the state legislators select senators. The people elect their state legislatures, so you see, it comes back to we the people. The state legislatures also get to select a handful of delegates for the selection of president. So, the people and the states have checks on the federal government through the House, the Senate, and the selection of the president by way of elections. As such, these elections are checks on the government. Now, the Fed also has checks on the people and the states. Initially, this was through laws, but nowadays can include financial incentives as long as the states agree, and if they don't agree, they run it through the court system up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides whether it's being done in a constitutional manner. Okay, thank you for spending some time with me, and I'll see you at the next YATCast. Are you enjoying the YATCast? Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/YATCast. That's https://www.patreon.com/YATCast.